How many of us feel like at some point in our careers we've been on a great team? Awesome. All right, so for the internet viewing audience, that was just about every hand in the room. Does anybody ever feel like they've been on a team that is so good it could not possibly be improved? Wonderful. That was actually maybe a half wave back there. For the internet viewing audience, once again, actually that was no hands in the room. And here's my challenge to all of us. We're here today, we're at WordCamp. We have this opportunity today and tomorrow to better our craft, to improve what we do, to take things from here and learn. And I'm going to be sharing a bunch of things about great teams that I've really focused on and learned over the last 15, 20 years. And I hope that everyone here can take even just one thing from what I'm talking about and bring it back to your own teams. Doing that will make your own individual team stronger, and that will help make WordPress stronger, and that will make the open web stronger. And I think it's a powerful thing. So change starts small. We'll get to it, if that agrees. All right. So as Justin mentioned, I'm the Director of Developer Relations at Pantheon. If you haven't heard of Pantheon, we're wonderful people with great product. We've got a booth over there. Happy to talk about that anytime. I've been with Pantheon for about 3 years. Before that, I did a lot of other things in the web space. I started off as a developer, and then after a while got a team that was larger and better, and supplemented my skills, and eventually elevated to the point where I could legitimately call myself a CEO, built a product owner, other things. But about 15 years ago, I realized the thing that I needed to do to make the results of the group I was working in was not to be a better developer, was not to be a better designer, not a better project manager, not a better at sales, although all of those things could have helped. The thing I realized that I really needed to do was work on management and leadership. And so I spent the last 10 to 15 years really trying to absorb everything I possibly can about these topics. And so what I'm sharing here today are not my own original thoughts. These are things I've learned from talking to other really smart people and reading great books. The slides, I'll share the URL after we're done. I do have links to things, and there are books and other things. So feel free, obviously, take pictures or something if you want. But the slides will be shared, so don't feel like you need to scramble for anything. So we're going to talk about a number of things. The path that I want to go to today, I want to talk about 3 traits of great teams. I want to talk about how to grow a team without losing that greatness. For those of us who manage a team or aspire to manage a team, I want to talk about things that you need to be thinking of it as in that role. And the last thing I want to talk about is something for all of us to deserve a great team. So if it were true, for example, that you had been to 5 teams recently and all of them sucked, might be on you, right? So all of us want to be on a great team. Make sure that you deserve it. So let's get to it. 3 traits. The number 1 trait I want to highlight of a great team is a shared purpose. So a shared purpose tells you why your team exists. And it should be something you could excel at. And it should be something aspirational and big. So WordPress itself does a great job of this. Democratized publishing. It's simple. It's powerful. It doesn't tell you what you're going to do tomorrow, but it sets a long-term vision that's incredibly motivating. And if you can do something like that with your organization or with your team within your organization, it really helps set direction. And really, it's something that we all can contribute to and work towards. And again, it might not direct what you're doing at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, but it can help you make those big decisions. And so if you can have something simple and concrete and aspirational and big, you are on your way to having a great team. The business jargon talks about this as being a BHAG. If anyone has ever heard that term or maybe not heard that term, that's some business jargon. Yay. Big, hairy, audacious goal. Think of something big, aim for it. And by way of illustration here, I want to take us back about 100 years. So about 100 years ago, the forefront of science and technology and design and art was not the web, was not things with computers, it was powered flight. This analogy comes by way of Simon Sinek. Has anyone ever seen he's got a talk on this? It's a really good talk. And again, that's in the recommended readings and things. But at that moment in time, it was not clear that powered flight was going to be possible. It was not really, there was like, ooh, this could happen, but the idea that you start on the ground, use an engine, have a person in there, get going fast enough, take off into the air, and then do stuff in the air and then land against it without dying. It was not clear that that was going to be possible, but a lot of people were working on it. At the time, if you were following this, you would read a fair amount about Samuel Pierpont Langley. Has anyone here ever heard of Samuel Pierpont Langley? Again, like the same people who saw the talk. Samuel Pierpont Langley was a really interesting person. He was the head of the Smithsonian. He was extremely well connected. He was well educated. He was well respected. But if you look at his writings, and you look at the things he said to his contemporaries and the things that he shared with others, he didn't write down a mission statement, but to be clear, it was something like this. I deserve a place in history, and powered flight is the way I'm going to do it. He actually made a lot of advances, and again, a lot of things were going on. Contrast that to the Wright brothers. Again, and if you look at what they were talking about and writing in letters to their friends and sharing with family members and other people in the industry, or this budding industry, they just had a sense of wonder and capability. The impossible thing, this impossible thing is possible. I know that we can do it. And if we do, it will change the world. And while Mr. Langley worked in a very well-funded environment and had contracts with the Department of Defense and other things like that, his team and his results didn't get there. But these people had the energy to stay up late and survive all kinds of obstacles and failures and get up and go again, even though, in some cases, life-threatening obstacles. They were actually legitimately risking their lives in this. But they persevered through all of it because they had something bigger and stronger to hold on to. And so this is a sort of grandiose example, but it's a real example of the power of why. So aim for something big and audacious. Have that big, hairy, audacious goal, the BHAG, and you will have one of the characteristics of a great team. Another one I really want to highlight is diversity. And I think for those of us in tech, this is something that we hear about with some frequency. But I think actually a lot of us underestimate how powerful this is, and a lot of us actually don't understand why it's powerful. I'm going to make a statement that I think actually what I'll do is I'll ask for hands to raise. How many of us think that the power of diversity is essentially many people come into the room, into the planning area, or whatever it is, come together, because they have many different ideas, there are more ideas, and now a better one can win. How many of us feel like that is our working definition of diversity? Just me. Nobody? Somebody? Okay, everybody. I kind of set that up badly. All right. So good job. You did actually suss me out. That is true. That is, in fact, true. However, that is a very small part of why diversity is powerful. And in fact, it is dwarfed by a very different and much more powerful effect. And that is when you are going yourself into a group setting and you believe that that group is somehow different than you in some meaningful way, whatever that way is, you work harder. What you do is if I'm going into a group and whatever the group is, I think I'm going to be presenting to 4 people who think just like me. Well, here's what I think we should do. And I don't spend a lot of time checking that. I don't really say is that really the smartest thing? And this is studied in the social sciences, and it is incredibly powerful. It by far outweighs the lots of ideas fact, which does in fact happen. Diversity makes us all individually work harder. And this has been highlighted in a lot of different studies, but one of the ones I think is really actually the most powerful. So Credit Suisse is a large financial organization based in Switzerland, I have to presume. They manage about $900 billion in assets. A few years ago, their job is to make more money. A few years ago, they did a big sort of munge through all of the data, all of the organizations that they had invested in, and they wanted to know what things cause more profits. Because we have a lot of money to invest, we want to know, is it that, whatever the characteristics might be. And they went through tons of data about all the companies they'd invested in. They found that, and I'm actually going to read it, organizations with at least one female board member yielded a higher return on equity and a higher net income growth than those that did not have any women on the board. I think that is astonishing to me. Like, again, having a single member of the board who is not the same gender as everyone else was enough to be a predictable, an absolutely predictable measure of more profit. Simply by having someone who is different in the room that you had to present to meant that the executive team planned harder, questioned their assumptions, and produced better results. It's powerful, and this has been studied again, social sciences all over the place. Credit Suisse, I don't know anyone who works for Credit Suisse, but I have to imagine that they're really kind of exclusively motivated by profit. If that study had come back and said, the thing that we need to do is increase global warming by 10%, we're going to be massively profitable, I'll just build a rocket ship and go to Mars, they might do that. They're not here to sing Kumbaya, they're here to make money. And that is, again, like saying, just a really incredible attribute to the power of diversity. And it works and has been studied in things, of course, we all know about gender and race and religion, orientation, age, something as shallow as politics, same thing. It's been studied down to sports team loyalty. If you love the Cubs and you are going to go present something to, I don't do sports ball, so I shouldn't have done this, but the White Sox, perhaps, you do an objectively better job presenting the information you're going to present. It's incredibly powerful. So, trait number 2, diversity. The third trait of a great team is the idea of having the right people in the right seats. And this comes from Jim Collins in a book, Good to Great, and it's been popularized since then. A lot of people really picked up on it. But the idea is this, it's pretty simple. You need to have a clear understanding for the differences between people and people who are good and the roles that they need to fill. So the right people in the right seats. So, for example, if I'm a person who is creative and enjoyable and fun and really have a lot of energy and such, but really kind of what I don't like doing is making lists and following all the things because I get bored there. If you put me, and I might be great at those things, into a role that requires lots of lists, like a project management or something like that, where it's super organized, follow through, methodical stuff, I might be a wonderful person in the organization and a terrible person for that role. If you do not have the right people in the right seats, you will not have a great team. And that means, so if you have a situation like that, you need to adjust the seat or the person. One of those two things needs to adjust. And also, if you have that situation, you're doing everyone a favor, including the person. If I'm in a project management role and those are my attributes, I probably am suffering. I'm probably not very happy, and it's hurting the impact of everyone else around me. So the right people in the right seats. So I would submit that those are the 3 traits. If you were able to pull these things off, if you have a shared purpose that's really clear, if you have diversity along as many different axes as you possibly can, gender, race, religion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, get as much as you can, you'll work harder and your results will show. And then you get the right people in the right seats, you will have the ingredients for a great team. How many of us have been, okay, so we've already established, everybody's here been on a great team. Has anyone here ever been on a great team that then all of a sudden stopped being great? Hands up. Great team. And I realize many of us work with coworkers here, so you can raise your hand on behalf of a friend. And if anybody sees a coworker raising their hand, that's their friend. Anybody? Come on, it's got some. All right. For those of us who felt that was the case, how many of us felt like growth? The team got larger, and that's what ruined it. Anybody have that? Yeah, okay, there's a couple fleeting hands. All right, like a bunch. Okay, again, we all know you're speaking for your friends. Let's talk about growth, because it's something that can be done in a variety of different ways. And if you want to maintain greatness through growth, I think there are several things you want to do. I'm going to recommend 4 steps very specifically. So I think there are 4 questions that you need to ask if you are at the point where everything is going, lots of people love your services, you've got this pressure to grow, all right, what to do now? And I would submit that these are the questions you should ask. Ask the team, what are we doing that isn't working as well as it should? And then, what are we missing? What do we need to do more of? And then individually, go to each single person. How about you? What do you want to do more of? What do you want to do less of? And by way of illustration, I'll say, for example, I have a web development shop. And we're doing really good work. Everybody's happy. We're starting to feel some pressure around front-end development. My front-end development somehow seems to be like just taking a little bit longer. We have all the work. We have the money. If we just had a little bit more front-end development, it seems like it would fill that gap. And now we would get our projects done a little bit more on budget, more on time. I could just do that straight analysis and say, like, front-end developer, we're going to write up a job description. I'm going to go Google like 20 job descriptions, grab one. There we go, modify it a little bit. Yay, front-end developer. I'm going to submit to you that this is a better way of doing it, however. What you might do is if you ask these questions, you might start talking with the team. Hey team, what's not working as well as it could? Everybody's aware of this front-end development problem. They might say things like, actually, the thing that's happening is our client approvals and our design stage and our ultimate delivery are all out of sync. Like, no one's really sure exactly what they're approving and why. And we just have a lot of like cross-communication here, and it's convoluted. Okay, that's interesting. What should we do more of? Might say, well, actually, we think we need the client more tightly involved in a number of different handoffs to help mitigate this. What does this have to do with front-end development role? Nothing. Don't figure that out yet. Like, that's okay. And then what you might do is go around to the team, say like, okay, we have this pressure, we have this opportunity to grow. What do we want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do? And you talk to Mary. Mary says, I love what I'm doing right now, but actually I've been playing with React just on the weekends and nights, and I think it's pretty fun. And I know that we need more front-end work. I'd love to do a little bit more of that. Could we figure that out? Interesting data point. And you might talk to someone else who's doing some client check-ins, for example, and feel like, actually, this really distracts my ability to get work done. I wish I could just get rid of that little piece. You might go through a process like that, hear all those answers, and realize what we need is actually some sort of client management person or account management person. Let this other person slot into the front-end work that we need to do. And you're still adding a person to your team. And objectively, say go forward 3 months in time, you might have solved your problem. Either of those paths might solve your problem of like, hey, we're not delivering front-end work fast enough, and therefore timelines, budgets, et cetera. However, if you are able to follow this process, you have just provided professional development for your team members. They have gotten a chance to grow and specialize a little further. Has anyone here ever been in a team or a job where there was another job description created somewhere that when you looked at it, you're like, that's a really cool job. I want that job. Has anyone ever felt like that? That is actually, I'm going to say like 30% of the hands in the room. That is a powerful and real thing. And I think it's a really bad thing. If you're in an organization that is functioning well, the people at the table already deserve a first crack at specializing further, getting their own take on things. So if you follow these steps, I think you have a much better job, or a much better chance of uncovering this and giving those people that opportunity and producing a great growth pattern for your team. Next thing I think you need to do if you are in the process of growing is understand your values and filter for them. And by values, I mean things like customer service or passion or curiosity or other things like that. If you are talking to someone who's got the most incredible resume ever, they invented the internet, for example, wow, I do the internet, you'd be a great person on the team. If they do not share your values, they will not be a good, productive member of your team long term. Does not matter what else is on their resume. Just simply filter for values. And that means early in your decision-making process, what you need to do is figure out, make sure you understand your own values, A. But then ask questions. And they're not good or bad. Someone who is a great fit for your team might be a really terrible fit for someone else's, and vice versa. So if someone, for example, if customer service is one of your values, you might want to ask a question early in the interview process, which is, tell me about a time where you had a really difficult interaction with a customer, and what'd you do? And if you heard an answer from candidate one, which was like, yeah, well, you know, people say customers are always right, but let me tell you about this one. Whew, I seem to get a lot of this. And they just start telling stories about customers and how they really kind of dislike doing things. They're not going to be a great match for your team. And that's perhaps a little bit overplayed. Somebody probably won't actually do that in an interview setting, but just design questions that will pull out the way that they approach problems. Because while diversity is incredibly powerful, for example, and this is something you really get a lot of access, if you don't have a decision-making framework that you can share, like, actually it's really important to serve customers, we need to do that, you will not get things done. So make sure you filter for values. Does not matter what else is on the resume. And then I would suggest that you follow a really structured process. We all have unconscious bias. We all have our own predilections and our own ways of seeing the world and our own predispositions. There are 4 different kinds of questions you can ask in an interview setting. The first 2 are moderately useful, but they sort of suss out, is someone basically qualified? Factual questions and skills assessments. Do you know this? Do you know how to do that? Et cetera. But what you are hiring for in this industry is their potential. If any of us had stopped learning 5 years ago, we would not be employable. That's just a simple fact of the industry we're in. We're in tech, things change, you need to adapt and grow. And so what you're always hiring for is a baseline of skills, so spend some time on those factual and skills assessment questions, but then try to get to know who they are in terms of the kinds of questions, kinds of behaviors they will have in the future. And that also opens a lot of doors too. For people who haven't done, like I've been working in this industry for a long time, there are a lot of people who I'm sure would be better at a gazillion things than me that have been doing it less long. Open those doors. So behavioral and situational questions are powerful things to help assess someone's potential. So once you know what the seed is, you know that you've only got candidates who follow your values, you've talked to someone, you think they've got a lot of potential, you're ready to make the offer. You need to understand what motivates people, and you need to be able to explain how you're going to motivate them. This is from a TED Talk from Daniel Pink. He's also got a book called Drive. It's a really awesome one. Some familiar people in the audience here. He describes an experiment, which is incredible and counterintuitive. Again, perhaps giving it away. So the experiment is this. There is a puzzle that requires some creativity. You give it to 100 people, 50 of them. You say, hey, we're trying to figure out how long it takes for people to solve this puzzle. Please, go ahead, go into the room, solve the puzzle. You tell the other 50 people, hey, we're trying to figure out how long it takes for people to solve this puzzle. And if you're the fastest person, we're going to give you $20. And if you're in the top 25%, we'll give you $5. So on the one hand, everybody's getting told, hey, we're timing people, we're trying to figure out how long it takes for people to come up with solutions to this sort of creative, not clear problem. And half of them are told, and we'll pay you more if you do it. Does anybody want to guess, how many people, hands up, who's the faster on average? The people who are just doing it, or the people who are just doing it and getting paid? Just doing it, hands. Some, just doing it and getting paid. It's about even. It is dominantly this. It is dominantly the not getting paid. Absolutely has been studied in different cultures, different monetary amounts, all kinds of things. And this is mind-blowing because we all do capitalism here, right? We pay for results. We are told about the gap in pay is due to paying for results, for example. Anyway, different thing. It's not true. In creative industries, extrinsic motivation, extrinsic meaning external, as in I'll give you a bunch of money, is a negative correlation with performance in creative endeavors. Now, there are situations where this other group does better, and that is things that robots can do. I once upon a time worked in a factory, pick up 2 things, put them over here. Pick up 2 things, put them over here. Like that kind of activity, which is just simply very clear, very rote, you know exactly what you're going to do right now and right next, et cetera. The group that's working for money actually performs better there. But in things that have not clear solutions, which is what all of us do, we talk to clients, we don't know what the problem is, the problem's been described, but we've got to come up with our own way to solve it. In those kinds of industries, in those kinds of roles, intrinsic motivations, being like what's motivating the people who are just trying to do the thing the fastest, is they're just trying to do it well. Like, I don't really care, but I want to do a good job. We all have that natural instinct. And so what Mr. Pink does a good job of highlighting is like the things that people actually care about are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So autonomy, and if you think about your own self, probably this rings true, autonomy is the chance to do good work on your own. Someone isn't micromanaging. We all hate that, right? I need the opportunity to understand what the problem is, have the support around me to do it, but then also I just want to get it done. If you show people how they will have autonomy in your team, in your role, they'll be very happy. If you can furthermore show them the opportunity for mastery, which is the opportunity to grow over time and improve over time. I am now a junior developer. I can someday be a senior developer. I'm going to learn these skills. I'm going to have these other opportunities. If there is a path for that, that is incredibly motivating. And again, think about yourself. Like, we all want that. We all want that. And last is purpose. We all want to know that we're contributing to something larger that we can believe in, which kind of comes back to have a clear purpose, a clear mission for what you're doing. If you can show the right candidate how they will have these things, you have the potential to add an incredibly powerful new team member to your team. So identify those seats, filter for your values. Does not matter what else is on the resume. Make sure you follow a structured process with a focus on situational and behavioral questions. And then make sure you're thinking about how you're going to provide autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And that is actually, I will and go further and say, you will not get the best candidate by offering the most amount of money. Now, those things are not necessarily negatively correlated. Doesn't mean that you can't still offer the most amount of money, but you will not get the best candidate by simply just paying more. They will go someplace better if they can show them these things. All right, next I want to talk about managing a great team. So for those of us who might manage a team now or hope to do so someday, I want to just share a couple of different things that I've observed and learned over the years. The first is that if you are managing a great team, the ugliest problem that team faces is yours. You don't get to assign it to someone else. If you do not step in front of whatever the nastiest, hardest to solve problem is, you're failing, basically. You need to own the ugliest one. So if you don't tackle them, also, you're failing your team, and they're seeing like, well, I guess we don't really care about big problems. It will eat away at morale if you do not do this. You also need to understand success and failure. So if you are managing a great team, you need to realize that success belongs to your team. It is the people doing the work that are being successful. Your job is it's kind of like great design. I've heard people describe great design as design that is pleasing yet disappears. That's what great management should be too. Like, oh, sure, seems, I don't know, kind of nice, and then everybody else on the team is highly productive. That's great management. So if things are going poorly, however, that means there are structural problems that you have not addressed, and that is on you. So if you are a manager, you need to realize that success happens on the people working on your team, but failure is something you absolutely need to own. And I find that praising publicly and addressing issues privately is the best pattern. It's certainly something I've learned over the years. And be vocal about public praise. I think we can, when you get used to high-performing individuals and team members, that becomes the new norm, and it becomes easier to take people for granted when they consistently do great work. But try not to let that happen. And the last thing I'll say is like, set by example the celebration of both success and victory. So when you complete something and it goes well, yay, that's a natural moment. I think all of us have that's maybe built into our own processes. Like, hey, thing launched. Like, we're all going to have lunch together. We're going to have a drink together. Or we're going to do something. We're going to exchange little Lego figurines or whatever. Like, whatever the little thing is that your organization might do. Probably many of us do that. But I would submit that celebrating failure is perhaps equally, if not more, important. And again, I just want to do a show of hands. If you think back on your own career and your own life, how many of the big lessons that you really understand now came from failure? It's not a binary question. How many of us feel like a lot of the all right, that was a lot of hands going up, even though it was poorly phrased. I think a lot of us, certainly this is my own self, like I think I've learned a lot of lessons. There are some that I still remember doing something like that was really dumb, or I set up a bad situation, or other things like that. Boy, I've learned those lessons really well. And if you can take those moments where you see your team, there's a failure, embrace that opportunity to never do it again. Whoa, that blew up. Okay, well, let's put out the immediate flames, and let's just really get into it. And don't do it like everybody makes mistakes. Like if this is not a repeated, recurring problem, you don't have a problem with the person. Just some things happen. Figure out what systems you can put in place, and also let's just expose, like, hey, let's all grow together right now. So celebrate failure. The last thing I want to talk about managing a great team is the importance of understanding the difference between policies and people. So by way of example, Pantheon has an unlimited vacation policy. We are able to do that because people don't abuse that. If someone were to come in and say, like, I need the next 6 months off, that would feel like a little bit of an abuse. So you might say, why? Oh, well, it's maternity. Well, we've got a different thing for that. But like, if you just, no, I want to go live in Bermuda and I don't want to work for 6 months and I want you to pay me. Like, that would be an abuse of a policy, and you would need to have a conversation about that. It doesn't mean that we need to change the policy. It means you need to talk to the person. Maybe you need to write something clarifying in the policy, like unlimited means kind of, within reason. It's probably, like, we don't really need to define that further. Within reason, please. And then you have conversations, maybe define it, maybe have some examples. I once had a client that had a situation where they had somebody who's doing something inappropriate and sort of like against the norms of the organization, who was repeatedly doing something in particular. And the way that they tried to address it is they went to the handbook, like page 17 of the handbook, and they added a new paragraph, and like, don't do these things, these are really bad things. And then 2 months, 3 months later, when it came up for reviews, that person was still there working with, had never been talked to about this. They said, well, here's the thing. You're not in compliance with, step 14 of page 13 on the handbook. I know you wanted a raise, but actually, you're kind of in trouble. And that's the way they dealt with like personnel issues. It was mind-blowing, and it was a great example of learning by failure. At least in this case, I was able to observe someone else's failure. If you have a problem with a person, you need to address that with the person. Maybe you can add something clarifying to page 14 of your handbook if you need to, but understand that people problems are things that need to be addressed directly with people. And if you're the manager, that means you are the person doing the direct, having that direct conversation. So, again, responsibilities for managing. Seek those thorny issues. Understand where praise and blame belong, and keep clear in your head the difference between people and policies. Don't attempt to solve a people problem with a policy change. Thank you. We're in good shape, all right. Last thing I want to share is something, again, for all of us. We all want to be on a great team. I want to share a couple thoughts around what it means to deserve a great team. So in order for all of us to deserve a great team, the first thing that we need is a growth mindset. So this comes from a book, I think it's actually called Growth Mindset. You're nodding your head, like it's, I think Carol Dwyer is the author, and again, that's in the slides. But all of us are growing, none of us is done. We all have potential. We all come into the world and have just all kinds of potential, and we still have all kinds of potential. You don't come in with 10 potential points, and I've already used 9 of them. I'm going to spend this last one like really carefully. I can only get better at cooking or WordPress. Ooh, I like both. That's not, you can do both, right? You know, like, you do not have a fixed cap on your potential. Understand that. That is what's called a growth mindset. And actually, Michelle, I think, was beautiful with this in the keynote. She, you know, like her first thing on what should you do as a person, be smart, learn. I really enjoyed the keynote this morning, and a lot of what she was saying is actually very similar to some of these thoughts. But be smart, learn. You have the potential to learn more. So if you want to be better at cooking and WordPress, you can do that. You maybe can't do them at the exact same time, but prioritize and just do it, and know that the whole world's ahead, like all of time is ahead of us. All of our potential is ahead of us. What we've done is cool, sets a trajectory, but we have, all of us, the capacity to change and grow. Recognize that. And don't define yourself by what you're not today. So I'm not a math person. I'm not a art person. I'm not a ballet person. Don't think of yourself like that. It just blocks potential for you. And there's no need to do that. There's no need to like cut that off. If you're like, I don't enjoy math and I really don't have a lot of motivation to get better at it, that's okay, as long as you have other things you're aspiring to. But don't define yourself as like, I just can't do it. Because it's not true. It is not true. You can. And I would say if you want to, like in terms of, if you want to make a change, know that the success of building habits start with small changes. So if you, for example, want to be running a marathon 6 months from now, don't try to run 4 miles tomorrow, right? Just go for a walk today. And then next day, do something a little bit more. And just build that over time. Very similar is the importance of language. So if you are on a team and you refer to that team as they, there is a problem. Either you don't fit on the team, you don't feel like you fit on the team, you think they don't share values with you, they don't share efforts with you. If the group you work with is a they, there is a problem. It's a little bit like in open source. We say, like, there's no they in WordPress. It's just we. It's just us, right? And understand, like, so you should address that. Figure out what causes you to have that separation in your head. And if you don't want that separation, start thinking of it as we. We are doing this, right? Language, thought, and action are all very closely related. Like, these things are all processed inside of us in different ways, but they're very closely related. And language is one of the easiest ones to change. And so if you want to belong, start thinking about it as we, and it will help a lot. It might change some of the things you do, and it might change some of the ways that the people around you interact with you. All right, the last thing I want to share about deserving a great team is the courage to address problems when you see them. So we can't all go through every single day and solve the biggest problems in the world. However, there's a saying like I want to have the wisdom to know the problems I can change, and the courage to do them, and the wine to ignore the rest. There are a whole bunch of proverbs around this, right? But if your response to challenge is complaining, it's not healthy, right? Evaluate whether or not you can do something about it, and oftentimes you can. And oftentimes there's something that you are doing, that I am doing, to enable a situation that I can make a change about. And leadership, like a change like that is leadership. And you don't need to be my name is Drew Gorton, comma leader. You don't have to have leader in your title in order to be a leader and lead change, right? So talk to the people around you, talk to the people on your team about, like, I want to see this change. I'm going to start doing these things. And this is why. And well, this is why I think it's a problem. I mean, don't just wander off and do something totally antithetical to the rest of your team. But if there's some agreement, if this is a real problem, probably other people on the team think that too. And by starting to have that conversation, starting to make small changes, you can affect a big change. So have the courage to address problems that you see. So again, deserve a great team. Have that growth mindset. Understand the importance of language. And then address problems as you see them. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I think that leaves us a good amount of time for questions and conversation. So thank you, everyone.
You mentioned the growth mindset. When you're looking to bring new people onto your team, is that kind of a trait and the behavioral situational question that you ask that you look for?
Yeah.
Or is that something that you expect to train in?
Both are acceptable. If you see a lot of potential in someone and they have like, so there's the thing that we all have called imposter syndrome. We're all imposters, right? None of us was trained for what we're doing right now from birth. None of us. Not even from high school, not even college, not even 5 years ago, right? We're all exploring this together. So if you are working with someone, you realize they're sort of tentative, and it's sort of like manifesting like basically imposter syndrome. Like, I don't know if I can do that, et cetera. You can absolutely bring that out of people, like, and show them that they have that potential. If you find someone who's already ready with that, great. But I would not call that a reason to not hire someone who's otherwise reading a strong potential.
Related to that, you talked about designing questions and like how to, sort a question for an interviewee. When it comes to something like passion, how do you really kind of like extract that as like
what are you excited
measurable?
about?
Yeah, what's that?
What excites you about this role, or what are you excited about, or something? The word well, you can actually just use the word passion in the question. But yeah, like, and when we're all in interview settings, we try to present the best self, or at least the self that we think that they think will be the best self. So sometimes you can try and get to that maybe with almost like a person, like what do you do in your life that really excites you? Like, it doesn't have to be work related, and see if they just like get energetic about something, like cool, and maybe have a segue to like, and what do you love about project management? What do you love about sales? And then see if that keeps going.
You mentioned not complaining, and I'm a big fan of that. I either solve the problem or I bring the problem directly to the person who can fix it for me.
Yeah.
What do you do when other team members don't have that philosophy and they complain? I haven't figured out how to tell them to stop complaining.
Tell them to stop complaining. I mean, like,
all right.
That is a people problem.
Yeah.
And you, depending, if you're a manager, that is a power relationship, and you can not necessarily demand that, but you can say this is really important and it's causing problems, and that effectively is a demand. That might result in personnel change, for example. You don't, like, if someone complains about the egg salad at lunch, and you're like, no more complaints, you're out of here. That's an overreaction. But you can just make it clear that there's an expectation here. Like, we work together to solve problems, and I understand sometimes we're frustrated, and like that's human. But if there's a repeated issue that needs to be addressed, you got to address it.
Two-part question about mainly around like writing a job posting.
Yeah.
First of all, do you think too many times a job posting is written with a specific person in mind, or someone thinks that like I need to ask for these specific skills and that's it? That's part A. Part B is how do you maybe approach that more to try and get more of a team fit, a skill growth, a growth mindset into something like a job description?
Yeah. I actually think that this set of questions might cause you to create an unconventional job description. And if you're able to create a well-rounded sort of picture of someone, and then realize, like, look, it's an 80% fit. Like, I asked for a bunch of things. Sometimes there's job descriptions that are written as like, that effectively, like, hey, we're looking for someone with 3 years of experience, and then you list out all the things. It's like, we need 10 years of experience with Node.js. Like, I don't know if anybody has that. And then we need 20 years of backend experience and 30 years of project management experience. Like those equivalents. Like, there are job descriptions that are pretty atrocious in terms of like the baseline requirements. However, my own take on a job description is that it's probably about 80% accurate of the person you will actually get in. And you need to have a clear understanding of how the person that you're bringing in brings these talents and others, and then a really clear understanding of, are those other talents going to be an overall boost for the rest of the team? because actually I heard some things in the interview, like in this down here. I didn't know, like there was one thing I couldn't address. This, what can you give to someone else? And someone on my team had said, there's, like, I want to get rid of this one thing, and I was like, wow, yeah, that. Okay, I hear you. I don't know how we're going to do that. And you hear maybe a new candidate come in that could maybe fill that, and you didn't see it till now how it could happen. That's a powerful thing to understand. So I would say this process gives you a really good chance of doing something that will find the right person. And while you're going for the next question, I want to just put a plug in for the rating, both this session and others. This really helps me, it helps the organizers, helps everyone. So all of the sessions have been are on Joined In. If you go here, just take a moment today, this session, other sessions, please do that.
Hi. So I'm fairly new to a management role.
Awesome.
And I'm wondering if you have any advice on kind of making that transition from kind of just working with your peers to managing your peers.
Wow, I did that a while ago. So I hope, so actually I have some people on the team that report to me in the room. I hope it feels like you're working with me, even though I'm your supervisor. I hope that that's what I do. And I hope that, again, a lot of what I do is try to clear roadblocks. Like my first job every day is to make sure everybody else is going to be able to be productive. And if that's not happening, then that's a problem. And I think people appreciate that. And that's just a different role. And it doesn't need to be like wake up in the morning and show everyone the org chart. Like, reminder, who's over here? Like, tap, 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 me, surprise. Just like yesterday. Yeah, I wouldn't do it that way. But if you just behave in that way, I think that's enough. And it's probably too much. If anybody is on my team and would be willing to raise their hand and answer that question, do I actually do that? He's sitting right there in the hat. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Oh.
So we had a team of generalists, but now we're at a size where we can actually have some specialization. And so I was wondering if you had any advice about making the transition from generalist to more specialization. In addition, the growth section was very helpful for that too. But
yeah, again, don't create a cool new specialist role that actually someone on your team wants to fill. It's just a technique. It's not a silver bullet, but I do feel like it does a really good job of addressing these things. You might find some surprising answers if you just take the time to talk individually with every single person and realize that actually they've been aspiring to do something different. They've been not brave enough to bring it up, or just haven't really been thinking about it. Make the space for people to specialize themselves, and then find the gaps. And uncannily, in my experience, that will line up with, oh, I think there's a job description for that. Like, I think we didn't just make that up. That is actually a role that many people in the universe actually want.
On that same point, like in this conversation, sometimes what you discover is what you want to do more of is either something that A, you're not very good at yet, and you need to kind of figure out how do we get you to a place where you can do that effectively, or B, doesn't exist in our org, and maybe the answer is you need to go somewhere else. And I think a lot of times, especially as early managers, we're sort of deathly afraid that people will leave. And you have to, at some point, recognize very few of us are going to retire from the company we currently work for. Like, people move on, and sometimes that's the best scenario, right? And healthiest for both of you. But sometimes you can catch that person and create a role that they fit into better and specialize and take on.
Yep.
I've had a lot of experience with people who kind of look at adjacent roles longingly, and sometimes it's a little bit of the grass is greener. And maybe they think they want to do sales, but it's because they've never actually done it and they don't really know what it entails. So you have to be a little careful of, like, just because I want to do something more doesn't necessarily mean it's the right fit for me. It might, but you just have to, like, explore that a bit more deeply, right?
Thank you. There was, yeah.
In moments when we, as a business, you make a decision to change the way maybe you're doing something or asking your team members to, sort of execute on something differently. I'm wondering if you give some tips on really how to kind of manage through a change.
Oh.
And especially for people that maybe are really just don't like it, right? And
Yep.
they're used to what they've always been doing and are very comfortable with it. How do you support teams to go through that change?
Yeah, a few thoughts. One is if you have something aspirational or foundational that you all agree on, it can really help be a grounding point. Because it's typically, you're not changing your reason for being or your values. You're like, hey, the reason we're doing this is because we want to treat the customers better. We're running into issues where they're just not having a great experience. If you can have that as a foundational sort of like, and therefore we want to make a bunch of changes, that can really help. Again, just alignment. And again, like any of us might react negatively to a particular change. In fact, that is a like deep ingrained thing. A lot of it, like change is like, ooh, wait, I knew how to do it yesterday. Why do I have to learn something new? Are we sure? The next thing I would say is over communicate. So at some point earlier in my career, I heard someone use the phrase, if you haven't said it 7 times, you haven't said it at all. And I'm surprised at how often I forget that. Like, I'll have said something, and I've been saying it to myself for a bunch of times, and I've said it once to you, and once to you, once to you, once to you, once to you, like, and then, that's probably 7 times. Probably everybody knows already. But I didn't actually concisely say it 7 times, all of us. And it's the thing, like, like hearing something once does not make a change. And so I'm definitely guilty of this, like realizing, okay, the reason we're not changing is because I actually haven't communicated it as well as I thought. I've been having a great dialogue up here. Like I was just like, everybody is tracking right here. But I haven't been saying that out loud as often as I need to. Yeah.
Probably only time for one more, so we can get you guys on your way.
I have a client with an issue that I hope applies to others in the room. Her business is really successful, her team is growing, and she needs help identifying what she calls the squish, which I would describe as the special sauce that she does well, and she needs to isolate it and then train her team on it. What advice would you have?
That feels like those high order problems that I was mentioning. So this is where my brain was, but all right, well, I'll answer with that, and then I'll think about it a little bit more. So that big, hairy, audacious goal, what is it you're striving for? And then values. Like, be clear about what those, like having a clear picture of those 2 things will uncover a lot and probably the specifics of the squish. Realize, actually, the thing that people love about us is the passion we bring to our work. Okay, so what are the physical manifestations of that? It's the fact that we have pajama day every Tuesday, and then we invite our clients over, and everybody's dancing. That probably is not what it is, but you might uncover the physical, the manifestations of those values. But if you don't understand the big, hairy, audacious goal and the values, you'll have trouble seeing how it relates. Cool. Thank you.